The Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has said Australia is very keen to secure a trade deal with the post-Brexit UK as quickly as possible. Mr Turnbull made his comments at a press conference in Downing Street during a visit to the UK.
We recognise that as Britain moves to completing its exit from the European Union, we stand ready to enter into a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom as soon as the UK is able to do so. So once that Brexit has been achieved, then we look forward to speedily concluding a free trade agreement with Australia. And as you said, I think we were the first on the phone to offer our support and assistance in that regard. At the same time, I should say, we are looking forward to the early conclusion of a free trade agreement with the European Union.
Well, joining me now from central London is the Australian High Commissioner to the UK, Alexander Downer. And the Prime Minister was saying we move quickly, Australians. We're fleet of foot, we don't muck around, we're very simple, so we'll move as quickly as possible. So how quickly does that mean, do you think, there could be an agreement?
Well, we can't conclude an agreement until the UK has actually left the European Union. But in the meantime, we've set up a working group. It's had its first meeting, and we'll be looking to have further meetings of that working group and discuss the scope of a free trade agreement before the point of departure. And honestly, after the point of departure, provided Britain doesn't want to put in place too many restrictions on trade, we really do mean by a free trade agreement, free trade, then it shouldn't take too long at all. We have a lot of experience of these sorts of agreements, and it depends, but some of them we've concluded very quickly.
And is that the approach you're using in the EU talks? Because you're having trade talks with the EU at the moment.
Yes, OK, we're a bit ahead of where the UK is at, because we can begin negotiations straight away with the EU. We're looking to begin those negotiations before the end of this year, and the Prime Minister's ambition is to conclude those negotiations before the UK leaves the EU. But we'll see whether that's possible or not, but we're certainly doing our best. We've done scoping studies, the two sides, so we know what the issues are, so hopefully we can move forward on that negotiation pretty quickly.
In terms of the Prime Minister's visit overall, what is the priority? Is it security? Is that very much at the heart of what he's talking to Theresa May about?
Well, there are many facets to our relationship with the UK. As you can imagine, it's a great relationship of trust and of intimacy. So they've been talking about counter-terrorism, even visited the Borough markets, where 2 Australians were killed in the recent terrorist attack there. But they've had long discussions about counter-terrorism, issues like encryption, cooperation between our various agencies, our police, our intelligence agencies and the like. And then they've talked about global issues, about China, the problem with North Korea, as well as the international economic issues and obviously Brexit and the free trade agreement.
And in terms of Brexit, what is the Australian view about a UK out of the European Union?
Well, the decision's been made, so I think it would be presumptuous of us to give a running commentary about it anymore. We did, before the referendum, express a view that we would have preferred the UK to remain in the EU, but the decision's been made, so there's nothing more to be said about it, really. We look to make the best of the new situation, and, you know, we have a very old and trusting relationship with the UK, so we should be able to put in place new economic arrangements through the free trade agreement. But there's a huge amount of Australian investment in the UK and British investment in Australia, and we'd expect those investment relationships to remain strong regardless of the UK leaving the EU.
You talk about the historical links between our two countries. You know better than most, because you hold a post that was held indeed by your father, I think, between 1963 and 1972. So I'm just wondering, if he was alive now and you were having a chat with him, what would he make of this new, different relationship that we have?
Well, what his generation would make of it was that they felt very much let down by Britain turning its back on Commonwealth countries, which had stood by Britain through thick and thin through the 20th century, including people like my father, who was in the Australian Imperial Force and in the Changi prisoner war camp for 3.5 years. So When Britain turned its back on Australia and Canada and New Zealand, they weren't too impressed, and my father was the High Commissioner here when Britain was negotiating entry into what became the European Union, and he was pretty unhappy about it. But that's his view. I mean, we live in a different era now with different circumstances, and I think perhaps a lot of older Australians would be pleased that it looked as though Britain was turning back to some of its old friends and, you know, its brother countries. On the other hand, younger people may have a different view. I mean, I was born, I'd like to say, obviously, well after the Second World War, so my generation and younger don't have the sort of experiences my father's generation had.
Well, Alexander Downer, it's great that you've given us your time this afternoon. Thank you very much for talking to us here on BBC News.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, I say, I think we're mucking up their game, sir.
Sir's right. They should be playing something decent like cricket.
All right, sir.